Welcome to Trending in Education. Mike Palmer here. I'm joined today by Dr. Jennifer Wells, who is the Director of Writing at New College of Florida, my alma mater. Jennifer, welcome to Trending in Education.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun getting to know you and getting to talk to you about U College and education, higher ed, all the thing.
All the things, they're
All
all
the things.
happening. I was talking to you earlier about VUCA,
Yep.
the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times we're living in. It is a time where you got to be quick on your feet and be able to adapt to what's coming at you. Before we get into the writing conversation, which is really where we wanted to go with this, writing, you also have experience in K-12. So, like, writing really throughout our lives, and in particular, what it means in higher ed right now, and what it means really for skills down the road and throughout our lives. We'll get into all that in a bit. Before we do that, we always like to get to know our guests a little better in their own words. Can you share with us your professional origin story?
Oh gosh. Yeah. So quickly, because I can sometimes talk up too long, but I actually did not graduate. I dropped out of high school, failed out of my first year of college, so was not a good student.
Mm,
Community college to sort of sort myself out, figured out why I was in college, and then graduated from, undergrad and got a job teaching SAT prep for Kaplan, which is, I know, a connection that we have.
I know.
And so I did that. And then because I knew someone at a high school, the high school lost two teachers the week before school started. And I had teaching experience because I'd been teaching for Kaplan. I got a job teaching ninth and 10th grade English. And
Mm,
so that's really like how I ended up teaching. I said, well, I'll do this for a year. And if I, don't hate it, maybe this is what I should do. And I really loved it. But I also realized I had no idea how to teach something that was just easy for me.
mm,
So went back to school, got a master's in English composition, so specifically teaching writing, and then really liked that and decided I wanted to get a PhD. At the same time, the different high school that I had been working at wanted to start a high school writing center, which is very unusual.
mm.
And so I wanted to do that job, but also get my PhD. So I decided to do both at the same time, which is maybe not what I would recommend. Well, but
Two birds, one stone,
yeah,
sometimes
why
think
not, right?
yeah.
And then I ended up studying the graduates of our high school and kind of following them through their first year of college with writing and reading in
Mm,
order to understand what made some of them, everyone was successful to some extent, but what made some of them more successful in that transition.
yeah.
And after that, I got my PhD, would have stayed at the high school, but, life is funny. So ended up getting a job at Florida State University. So moved from the San Francisco Bay Area to Tallahassee, Florida,
Yeah.
which was a jump, a little bit of a
Yeah.
leap
Yeah.
culturally. And, ran the writing centers there. There were 8 locations. So it was a lot of project management and
Yeah. FSC was
staffing and
big. Yeah.
yeah, it's massive, but that was really, I hadn't ever been to I didn't go to a large R1 university, so it was fun to be a part of that. A lot of the football players took classes through the
Yeah.
writing
I
center.
think the chop would have gotten to me.
Yeah, yeah, you learn a lot of things. So, while I was there, I was just looking at my field's job wiki, and I saw this position at New College of Florida, which I had never heard of,
A
like
lot of
many
people.
people.
Yeah.
And once I started to look into it, I thought, and this is really kind of foreboding as it turns out, but how does this college even exist in Florida or it even exist at all? Because
Yeah.
everything about it just resonated. The narrative evaluation instead of grades, especially for writing, was yes, amazing. And then that it was small, and I really at Florida State, I missed
Mm,
getting to know students as freshmen and
mhm.
then following them through their 4 years like I had at the high school. So,
Right, right.
we had missed that sort of long-term, knowledge of a student, and so everything about New College, once I learned about it, I was like, "This is my dream school, so I get
Right.
my dream job,
Yeah.
got the job." That's my origin story. There's more
Yeah.
to it. New
I'm
College had never had a writing program or writing curriculum, so
mm,
there was a lot of stuff to build.
yeah, and then for folks who are less familiar with New College, you were touching on it there too,
Yeah.
but, like, small public liberal arts college in Sarasota, Florida, has been sort of thrust into the culture wars since the DeSantis administration appointed a bunch of new members of the board of trustees. I have launched a spin-off podcast called the Palm Court Podcast, Palm Court Pod. For those who are curious to learn more about New College, we talk about that a lot. We're not going to really get too much in depth there, aside from the fact that, to your point, New College is very much a place where you learn how to write,
Yes.
and especially to graduate, because you have to write a
Yeah.
thesis. It's very writerly, all the things you were talking about, narrative evaluation. Your teachers write your evaluation. It's satisfactory or unsatisfactory, and then a narrative evaluation. You write a lot of papers. I remember, I'm in the early days of word processing when I was going to college, but I remember, a 10, 20 page paper was pretty typical. Most of our assessments were in blue books. They were written. They were not, multiple choice. We kind of looked down on some of those types of tests. The challenge, I think, back late 80s into the early 90s then was there really were very few supports, and some students really couldn't pass that
Yeah.
muster. They couldn't, get across that threshold. Frequently writing was part of the problem.
Mm.
And then now extending that into this day and age, one of the things that I wind up talking to people a lot about is, what are the durable skills, the future proof skills that people need to develop to both be employable, but then also be good citizens. And, writing to me is very foundational there. You've kind of built a career out of doing this. You've also looked into, you were touching on a little bit there, the connections between writing and some of the things you might even do in high school, how that then translates into what you do in college. And then
Yeah.
ideally, how does that really translate into, some tools that you really have with you to be an effective human all of your life?
Yeah, I mean, New College having such a culture of high expectations for writing. Like you said, in the 80s, higher ed in general had more of a sink or swim
Yeah.
sort of a so
It's
either
like Gen X. We were latchkey kids to begin with,
yeah,
figure it out.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And, that was great if you came from a pretty well-resourced background and you had probably family that had done this before you. And, there were things that would help your success in that environment beyond your actual skill.
Right.
And then I think now you see a huge shift since then in that attitude that I feel like if we admit a student, then it is our responsibility, ethical responsibility to provide as much support as we can
Mm.
if they are motivated to succeed. I think there was a little bit of that attitude at New College when I started about, if they can't write, then we shouldn't be
Right.
here.
Yeah.
No one would say that in that way, but there was that attitude. Even though New College didn't have a writing program, we didn't have a first year writing course that was required of everybody. Actually, there were no writing courses when I got there that were
Yep.
for creative writing, but no academic writing courses. And so I was hired to build this program, design curriculum, make the writing center, which did exist, make that more functional and, bump up our utilization rate because it was not great at that time. It improved the perception of that service and, in the college in
Yeah. And
general.
this is about 10
It
years ago,
was
timing
10
wise.
years ago. Yeah,
Mhm.
in 2014 is when I started, related to the Florida Board of Governors and the legislature's metrics. I was hired as to help our metrics basically, which I did. But, starting a program at a place like New College, there wasn't any, curriculum, but there were a lot of belief about how things should be or how writing should be taught.
Yeah.
So really, I didn't expect that. And I think that was a huge mistake that I made. It was not trying to understand what people's preconceived notions were, but, push through that and have been able to build a great program. We have a rhetoric and writing minor that we were able to build and get approval for. We have a really great writing enhanced course program. So faculty learn how to teach writing in their discipline, which is
Mhm.
what students at New College really need. Like I can't teach them how to write an anthropology paper because I'm not an anthropologist,
Mhm.
but I can help the anthropology professors teach writing in their discipline. So
Mhm.
and the Writing Center has just taken off and, over half the students see us every year. So all in all, it's been so much fun and a lot of stress, but
Yeah.
really rewarding to design something and have this is very new college, have the agency to design what you know is best from your own professional background and your research and not have a lot of obstacles in the way and make something that fits the college and fits the needs of the students and the faculty.
Well, it's also interesting in that your full career kind of spans from thinking about this at the high school level,
Yeah.
even in ninth and 10th grade, right on through this transition into college and then figuring out what about writing. It's almost like the awakenings that have happened in higher ed, where,
Yeah.
initially it was really just about who you admit. And then it
Mhm.
became, or it's becoming now, who can finish,
Mhm.
who you can admit, and then can they still finish? Once they're in, can you get them across the finish line? And then now I think the third level awakening that's happening is so that they can then have a job and a successful life on the other side. That's the part that to me is interesting as a topic for a trend spotting show about education, is that, folks are almost talking past writing, or they're kind of looking past writing in all this conversation, partly because I think the AI shook us around writing. You learn to write not just so that you write better, you learn to write to develop ways of working, grit, resilience. I know you've talked
Absolutely.
about revisions,
Mhm.
and even I've always thought in order to write well, you have to think well.
Mhm.
And if you can teach people how to write, in essence, you're helping them learn how to think better.
Definitely. I mean, I think writing is thinking made visible. And so
Hmm.
that's one of the things that I think AI kind of misses is that it removes the possibility for the person to be thinking through their
Hmm.
writing.
Hmm.
And as you know this, as you write, you sort of refine your thoughts or you may repeat something a couple of times to find out, oh, that's what I meant to say. And that's the way. And I tell students in my classes and in my college essay, application essay workshops specifically that you want to draft big because you want to get everything out and get all of your thoughts out and not cut yourself off before you actually figure out what you wanna say. And so I think you're right, and, I think that at New College, we did see, a lot of our students historically have been through the AP program or the International Baccalaureate program or the ACE program, Cambridge program. So they've been in these college prep academic tracks throughout high school, and that is great, and I saw that when I taught high school students, were in AP, that really helped a lot of them develop confidence in their college journey. Some of our best teachers taught in AP, but then as on the college side, and this is gonna get back to the point about thinking and process, like, I see students at New College historically come in with kind of a paralyzing level of perfectionism about writing,
Hmm.
where if they do not write a perfect draft immediately, then they don't even start. Like, they would rather not turn something in
Right.
because they didn't wanna write a bad draft,
Right.
and some of that, I think, comes from the emphasis on timed exams where the emphasis is on the final product. Whereas at New College, what I try to teach students is, like, I want you to engage with all of these processes. We talk about project management. I teach them how to do Kanban and Pomodoro.
Yeah.
How do you manage your workload? How do you
Yeah.
manage a large writing project? Revision, that's more than just editing. It sometimes, I have students print out their paper and we cut it up and move sections around and tape it back together. So I think what New College allows, because of the way that we do our assessment, is I can privilege this much more slowed down process. And if they do all the things that I ask them to do, their final product will be good and it will be better, most likely, than what they would have done without that.
Right.
But I have to emphasize the final as much as, everything else. And so I do a labor-based grading system or evaluation system where they have to do all the things. Like you
Right.
can't just reassignments and then pass. Like they get credit for every single in or out of class activity because the process is important to me.
Mhm.
And I think in terms of transitioning from college to the workplace, having that understanding of different processes of project management, of time management, of revision, of writing as a way of thinking, all of that is very transferable.
Mhm.
And that's what I want our writing curriculum to really help students know and be able
Mhm.
to articulate.
Right.
So it's kind of an interesting moment for writing in higher
Yeah.
ed. I
Right.
also think that, writing does a lot of things that AI will not be able to do.
Right. It's interesting you mentioned labor-based
Yeah.
practices. We had an AI expert friend of the show, Beth Rutten's on a bunch, and she was talking about how understanding is a labor. Charles Eames, I just saw this quote, never delegate understanding, where it's like to actually understand something, you have to kind of struggle with it. There's also that idea of productive struggle, actually going through the hard work of going back and being like, no, that's not right. Let me try to express that differently.
Yeah.
That is valuable time. And that is time that is worth spending as human labor. There's even trends now around assessments, which I
Yeah.
think you're touching on here, where like, how do we get it so that we're ensuring that people are engaging in the actual labor, the hard work, human powered work that actually leads to understanding. At the same time, from a professional level, these tools are going to keep getting better. And, I argue against a head in the sand mentality around this stuff where, I've even heard folks say that you should have these tools just so that when you're creating an assignment,
Mhm.
you could even run it through the
Yeah.
premium version of these things so that you're
Yeah.
most affluent and ready to adopt the new tool students, you kind of know how they're doing shortcuts because it does seem around writing, there are new challenges out there because there's a lot of ways to get pretty good really fast.
Yeah. So again, I mentioned that I've been teaching college application essay writing since I was teaching high school. It was
Yeah.
something when we started the writing center to get the sort of high achieving students to use the center, which then set the tone for the other students. And then that center was just super successful. And I think because of that strategy, and so I started teaching these workshops and then I've continued to teach them, with different nonprofit partners. I was able to do them through the writing program at New College for 3 years. We got a local family foundation grant funded that, and then an alum founded that. And so I love to teach this. It's like my favorite genre to teach, but there's a lot of questions about, well, are students just going to have AI write their Common App essay or their college
Right.
essay?
Right.
So in my workshops, I actually, I have sample essays from Johns Hopkins website, which is just a fantastic resource where they highlight some of their favorite essays for that year. And they talk about the admissions team talks about why. So it's really helpful. But then I have AI write one too. And
Sure.
I say, hey, like, let's talk about these different samples. What do you notice?
Mm,
And at this point, the AI generated essays don't have a level of specificity that I am trying to get students to get to.
right.
They don't have a very interesting voice, kind of flat. It's hard to explain. And the students see it and they know exactly the ways in which the AI generated essay is not as effective as, even if it's not as grammatically correct,
Yeah.
the one an actual human student wrote. If they take the time and, do the revision and really understand the genre, those can be very compelling.
Mhm.
I know that, it's a human to human connection that
Mhm.
it's when you're trying to make a connection with your reader,
Right.
have a minute to read these. So, you know, don't write in a robot voice.
Right. And even in terms of the revisions of what the AI gives you now, it's almost like you need to go back in. There are places where it's okay to use these tools. That's the other thing where like,
Yeah,
and then in many of those contexts, it does get you to a draft much faster. And then you can add to the draft. And then the other thing I've heard a lot of people talk about, and I've used it a little bit for this, is for brainstorming, just for coming up with a lot of ideas. This is where I always say great ideas really are birthed from the mulch of bad ideas. You actually people are afraid to put bad ideas out there as humans because you're getting judged.
yeah,
Whereas AI, you could ask for 30 ideas and it'll give them to you. And most of them will be bad, but you'll
right.
at least then it goes from I don't know how to generate this
Yeah,
to now I'm reacting to it. It's almost as though we're gonna need to be better at editing. Better at, like, discernment of,
yeah,
like, a Turing test for writing,
yeah,
is this written by a human or not? Or, like, how much humanity is expressed in here? And then
right.
also from an editing perspective, if it is gonna be this dance with the AIs sometimes, what are they good at? And then where can I add more on
Yeah.
top of it? It's gonna be a pretty wild ride, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, I use generative AI myself. My, neurodiversity makes it hard for me to always catch typos, which seems right that, as a professor of writing, I should have perfectly written prose all the time. So I use Grammarly. We actually have a former student writing assistant who worked in our writing center who's now, I think, in sales at Grammarly. And yeah, I use it. And I also know when it offers me a stylistic suggestion, I know enough to say I do or don't want that.
Right.
And most of the time I don't because I'm writing with intention. But with students, I think that I'm going to make a connection to faculty who respond to student writing by correcting, like writing on
Mm,
their paper or rewriting their sentences.
mhm.
Student in both the Grammarly suggestion and the faculty suggestion will often just accept the suggestion without a critical evaluation of, is this what I want?
Yep.
Right. And so both of those cases I find actually, it's kind of aggressive for either Grammarly or a faculty member to rewrite a sentence for
Yeah.
you. And so that's something that connects with, our work in the writing center. Students come in and our student writing assistants are trained. They have to take a class to even be eligible to apply. So they
Yeah.
they get a lot of more job preparation than any other student role on campus. But we teach them to respond as a reader and
Yeah.
say, "This is what you're saying. This is how this is impacting me as a reader."
Mhm.
And so just mirror that back to the student, and then that puts the agency, gives the student their control. Like, you know what the reader is thinking
Yeah.
and what you want them to think. If not, like, what can we do? And then you can have a conversation. But in the end, the student owns their revision.
Mhm.
It's not directive either from an AI bot or from someone who's telling them what to do. And I think,
Yeah.
I know there was some talk this past week about, Google and AI tutors. And I think that the way that I think about tutoring in terms of writing is very different than what the AI tutor bots are being used for or being built for.
Mhm.
Because what we want is just to provide that human connection and say,
Mhm.
you're trying to communicate, this is what I'm experiencing. Is that what you want? No, yes. And then you go from there. So there's a lot of connections there between AI, faculty responses to student
Right.
writing, writing
Right.
center,
Yeah,
you know.
there's a lot of blending that's happening now with the tools, which is true even dating back to, word processing was a real breakthrough when it happened. Otherwise, people were the way you
Yeah.
write on a typewriter is very different, thinking about revisions versus the way you freehand versus what you can do in a word processing software. And in some ways now, the tools are getting better. I also am calling this Clippy's revenge, where we thought we got away from Clippy, but now he's back and he brought help. And they're not all great. Autocorrect, I think, is getting worse. Like I feel like it's almost gaslighting me, which is a whole separate topic. So we've had a great conversation about AI. We're getting into some of the really interesting intricacies there. Some of that's theoretical. What's practical and what's happening nowadays is workshops like the ones that you're running this summer. Can you
Mhm.
talk a little more about what that is and kind of what your plan is for the stuff you're doing over the summer?
Yeah. So, like I said, I've been teaching college application essay writing workshops for groups for about 17 years. I do some of that one on one work, but I really enjoy the group dynamic. And my goal is to help as many students as possible. So, yeah, like I said, the last 3 years we were able to do the workshops through the writing program. And what was great about that is I was able to connect with our admissions office and they were able to at least promote the workshops through their enrollment funnel.
Yep.
And what's been fascinating is to see the data rolling in after, each year, the fact that, the students who signed up for the workshop, of the students who completed the workshop, they were almost like 100% more likely to be admitted to the college than the students who had just signed up and not participated. And then of the students who were accepted to the college, the percentage of students who actually enrolled in the college was an average 35%, and that includes last year, which was kind of a tumultuous year. And I'll talk more about the curricular aspect of it, but I think that the college application essay has sort of been thought of as this transactional part of the application, and what
Mm.
I've seen is not only is it a learning opportunity for students, but also it really helps the college connect with that student when they are making a decision about where to apply. And so
Yeah.
for these small colleges, new college included, you know, you do need more students and it's a very competitive marketplace. So what can you do to differentiate yourself? I think these workshops were a way that new college was able to differentiate itself. I think it's such a great possibility for small colleges to improve their applicant yield. If you're applying to colleges, you don't know these colleges, you only see the marketing materials, you don't really have maybe a personal connection, and you do a workshop that either someone at that college offers or someone like me offers on behalf of that college, and all of a sudden you form an emotional connection with
Yep.
that school, you're much more likely to consider that school because of that connection that you've built. And
Yeah.
then on top of that, I think it's morally a good thing for colleges to do
Mm.
because, private essay coaches charge a lot of money. And if students, their families have the money, they can pay for that. But most students don't get a lot of this guidance. The high school curriculum is, even the AP is full and there's, test deadlines. So there's not a lot of room to slow down and actually teach this genre.
Yep.
And so a lot of students just really would benefit from a little bit of guidance and instruction and
Right.
understanding the genre.
Right. It changes the relationship with the student around the essay, where
Absolutely.
if you're helping them to write the essay, they realize, oh, they actually want me to express myself because they kind of want me to be there, as opposed
Yeah.
to if this faceless
Yeah.
entity is going to either thumbs up or thumbs down based on however I'm trying to write. It does also remind me of, neurotypical people and people with learning disabilities and all the folks who are missed, and even
Mm.
New College, as much as I have really positive feelings for the school. Back in the day, I'm sure some folks were dyslexic and, we're dealing with lots of stuff. We probably lost a lot of people because we didn't really have that kind of positive outreach. And
Yeah.
then the opportunity you have with a small school is for it to be a little more personal. You actually do feel seen. You feel kind
Yeah.
of like known by the organization on the other side. And then the curricular aspect, what's your flow? How do you teach
Yeah.
people how to write nowadays?
Well, and so I think, the essay workshops are really good microcosm because I use the same techniques and strategies in those workshops that I do in my classes. And again, I
Yeah.
care about process and I care about transferable skills. So I'm always in the workshop saying, we're going to do this for this purpose now, but also you can use this approach, after. For one of our first activities, it is looking at sample essays, sample, other students have written in order to understand what the genre is. Like,
Mm,
what is this essay style? A lot of students genuinely don't know that they can use the first person in this
mhm.
personal statement, right?
Right,
Because they've been
right.
so drilled and you don't use I in your writing. So we talk about that, but I tell them, we're going to look at each paragraph and you're going to analyze like what information is the author giving you, but also how do you feel in
Mm,
response. And I tell them anytime you're faced with a genre that you haven't written in before, whether you're going to write an op-ed for your high school journalism class or you're going to write a paper in anthropology again, this is how you can deconstruct that piece of writing, a sample, in order to understand what you were supposed to do. And
yeah.
so, I make that connection.
Mhm.
And like I said, we do a lot with the workshops. I do Pomodoro. So we do 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off,
Yep.
explain what we got. We do a lot of draft big. So come up with multiple topic ideas, not just one, which again, like if they're used to only writing for these timed essays, the idea
Yeah.
that you would write something and not use it seems very inefficient,
Right.
but so important for college writing.
Right. Well, especially if you add also the mythology around last minute. There's
Yeah,
still New College has a lot of legends about writing. I was
yeah,
on a 3-day all-nighter in May to write my thesis. I wrote a 80-page thesis in 24 hours. There's a lot of, bravado and talking about that. And it's almost like either you procrastinate and then you just knock it out and move on to the next thing, or you take a timed AP exam and you kind of knock it out in an optimal way there. And then you have to motivate people. It's almost like going to the gym, right? You have to kind of say, pain is weakness leaving the body. So, like, if you're suffering while you're writing, it's because you're actually getting better in the process.
Yeah, and I use an analogy, like, I once trained for a half marathon at Disney World because it was Star Wars themed, and I was like, "I wanna do the Star Wars half marathon." Well, I hate running, like, I
Yeah.
hate my
Did you wear the Princess Leia buns or
No, I didn't. I think I was just trying to survive at that
that makes
point. I
sense.
don't feel bad
It's
running
hot in
now.
Florida. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, but, like, I had to train, and I had to do all these practice, training miles, and I didn't enjoy any of it, but I liked the race, and I liked getting the medal at the end, and so I
Yeah.
tell students, like, "You may feel like this isn't fun, and writing is hard, and that's okay." Like, that's a normal some people really like writing. Even though I'm a professor of writing, I actually don't really like, writing is hard for me, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's always hard.
Yes.
And that's okay because it's a hard thing to do. But, like, you have to kind of get through those miles of training in order to be able to make it through a half marathon and
Yeah.
or, 4 years of college and or a senior thesis at
Right.
right?
And also to get paid, you're gonna have to do something
Yeah.
hard, likely. Like, people
Yeah.
generally don't like to pay you for things that are easy to do and or easy to just get
Yeah.
a bot to do it. So, like, you have to start thinking, where will I apply my I've also heard it described as a cognitive surplus. So, like, we're gonna have
Uh,
more automation and then we'll have more capacity to do new things, but then that will still require human effort and will require us to engage. I'm talking with Dr. Jennifer Wells, who's the director of writing at New College. Been a wonderful conversation, Jennifer. As we're starting to wrap up here, any takeaways, any concluding thoughts for our listeners?
but yeah, my takeaways, I think, would be to, some of these academic programs that are preparing high school students for college, AP, IB, ACE, et cetera, dual credit, to really talk more with college faculty and learn more about what is it that college faculty, particularly for me, writing faculty, what we need to see students coming in with. For me, it's not so much about skill because I can teach them things, but it's about dispositions towards learning.
Mhm.
And if the curriculum developers can take that into account in some of the things that they're developing and working on in new programs or new AP classes and can really think about how is this curriculum and this experience going to shape a student's orientation towards learning,
Yep.
that would be fantastic. So I think just more of that conversation, across the post-secondary divide, just like we need more conversation between post-secondary and employers. I
Yep.
think there's a lot of myth on all sides, like high school teachers saying, college, it'll be like this. And then I'm in college and I'm like, but it's not like that. And then likewise, college faculty trying to help a student apply for a job that's not in academia, like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that can be a challenge because they don't always have knowledge of what that is. It's just lore. And
Yeah.
so I think again, opportunities to have better conversations across divides and then to continue to refine curriculum so that students are getting the skills they need, but also those dispositions for learning, I think will be really helpful.
Yeah, I love that. I've been hearing more about mindsets in addition to skill sets
Yeah.
where, like you said, like skill sets, they also change. The way we do
Yeah.
certain things do change as technology evolves and the world evolves. But the mindset, that's what you hold on to and what really powers you through the rest of your life. Jennifer,
Yeah.
it's been amazing having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much.
And for our listeners, hopefully you enjoyed what you heard. If you did, please subscribe, tell your friends, do all the good things. We'll be back again soon. This is Trending in Education.